Mist clung to the lowlands of the Willamette Valley as a field biologist began his survey. His eyes caught a flicker of movement. Two shapes emerged. At first glance, a pair of adult bobcats. But as he raised his binoculars, he froze. They weren't adults at all. They were bobcat kittens, enormous kittens. They were impossibly large, far larger than any bobcat kitten he had ever seen in Florida, defying all his previous research and documentation. One of the kittens was struggling, moving with a painful limp that spelled certain doom in the unforgiving wilderness. Why were these youngsters the size of small adults? He had come here for a simple survey. Instead, he uncovered a rule of nature hiding in plain sight. Before we start, hit the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. The morning mist still clung to the Douglas firs when Dr. Marcus Thompson pulled his weathered pickup truck onto the gravel access road leading into Finley National Wildlife Refuge. At 62, Marcus had spent the better part of 4 decades studying wildlife across the American landscape, from the swamps of Florida to the high deserts of Nevada. But it was here, in the verdant valleys of western Oregon, that he'd chosen to spend what he'd thought would be his final field season before retirement. The May morning carried that particular northwest chill that made him grateful for his thermos of black coffee, steam curling up as he poured a cup and reviewed his survey notes. The refuge, sprawling across 5,325 acres at the southern edge of the Willamette Valley, had become his second home these past 3 months. He was conducting a comprehensive mammal survey for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, documenting population changes and habitat use patterns, routine work that had defined much of his career. Marcus had started his morning as he always did, checking the motion sensor cameras he'd positioned along game trails throughout the refuge. The familiar weight of his field pack, laden with notebooks, medical supplies, camera equipment, and emergency gear, settled comfortably on his shoulders as he hiked toward his first station. The forest was alive with the dawn chorus, varied thrushes, Pacific wrens, and the distinctive drumming of pileated woodpeckers echoing through the canopy. It was near the edge of a meadow, where the oak savanna transitioned into mixed conifer forest, that movement first caught his attention. Two shapes, tawny and spotted, emerged from the tall grass approximately 40 yards ahead. His hand instinctively moved to his binoculars, a practiced motion refined over thousands of field hours. Through the magnified lenses, Marcus expected to see what the size suggested. A pair of adult bobcats, perhaps a mated pair establishing territory for the breeding season. Oregon's bobcats were known to be larger than their southern counterparts, something he'd noted in his preliminary observations. But as the animals moved closer, their gait revealed something that made him lower his binoculars and blink hard before raising them again. These weren't adults. The proportions were all wrong. The oversized paws, the slightly fuzzy coat texture, the way they moved with that particular combination of curiosity and caution that marked them as juveniles. These were kittens. But their size was extraordinary, far exceeding anything he'd documented during his years studying bobcats in Florida, where the cats would sometimes wander through his backyard in Gainesville, hunting rabbits among the palmetto scrub. Marcus remembered vividly the Florida bobcat family he'd monitored for 3 years, the mother who'd raised successive litters in a den near his research station. Those kittens, at what he estimated to be 4 to 5 months old based on these Oregon cats' developmental markers, had been perhaps half the size of what stood before him now. The difference was so striking that for a moment, he wondered if he might be looking at young Canada lynx, though the habitat was wrong and the markings clearly indicated bobcats. One of the kittens, Marcus mentally designated it Kitten A in his field notes, stood remarkably still, its amber eyes fixed directly on him with an intensity that sent a slight shiver down his spine. There was intelligence in that gaze, a mutual assessment taking place across the species divide. The morning sun, breaking through the canopy, illuminated the kitten's spotted coat, each marking distinct and beautiful against the tawny background. But it was the second kitten that made Marcus's heart clench with professional concern and unexpected emotion. This one, Kitten B, moved with a pronounced limp, favoring its left front paw significantly. Each step seemed labored, and even from this distance, Marcus could see the exhaustion in its posture, the way its head hung slightly lower than its siblings, the visible prominence of its shoulder blades beneath the fur. The wildlife biologist in him knew the protocol. Observe, document, don't interfere. Nature had its own harsh mathematics, and intervention often caused more harm than good. But the wildlife rehabilitator part of him, the part that had volunteered countless hours at rescue centers, that had bottle-fed orphaned raccoons and released countless recovered raptors back to the sky, recognized an animal in genuine distress. Marcus slowly, deliberately, reached into his pack and withdrew a small portion of the emergency provisions he always carried. Some dried venison from his own freezer, originally intended as his lunch. Moving with the careful, practiced motions of someone who'd spent a lifetime around wild animals, he placed the offering on a flat stone about 10 feet in front of him, then backed away slowly, eventually settling behind a fallen log some 30 feet distant. The healthy kitten maintained its watchful stance, but Marcus could see its nostrils flaring, catching the scent of the meat. The injured one had collapsed into a sitting position, its injured paw held slightly aloft. The morning stretched on, the forest sounds continuing around them. A red-tailed hawk's cry overhead, the rustle of ground squirrels in the underbrush, the distant crash of a Roosevelt elk moving through the timber. It took nearly 2 hours. Marcus remained motionless, his aging joints protesting the prolonged crouch, his coffee growing cold in the thermos beside him. But patience was perhaps the most essential tool in a field biologist's arsenal, and he'd learned its value through countless dawn vigils and midnight observations. The injured kitten moved first, hunger finally overwhelming its instinctive wariness. It approached the offering with painful slowness, that damaged paw barely touching the ground with each step. As it began to feed, Marcus could better assess its condition. The kitten was definitely malnourished. He could count ribs beneath the fur, and the hip bones were too prominent. The injury had clearly been hampering its ability to hunt effectively. Through his binoculars, Marcus could now see the wound clearly. The pad was torn, possibly from a poorly executed landing during a hunt or an encounter with the refugee's abundant blackberry thorns. Infection had set in. He could see the swelling, the angry red edges of the wound. Without intervention, this kitten faced a grim prognosis. The healthy sibling eventually joined its littermate at the food, and Marcus used the opportunity to inch closer, moving with glacial slowness. His field kit contained basic veterinary supplies, antibiotics, bandages, antiseptic solutions. He'd used them before on injured study animals, though never on a predator species without sedation. What happened next would remain, for Marcus, one of the most profound moments of his long career. As he approached within 6 feet, close enough to see the individual whiskers to count the spots on their coats, the injured kitten looked directly at him. There was no aggression in its posture, no baring of teeth or flattening of ears. Instead, there was something that looked almost like resignation. Or perhaps, though Marcus knew the danger of anthropomorphizing, trust. Moving with infinite care, Speaking in the low, continuous tone he'd learned calmed most mammals, Marcus extended his hand toward the injured paw. "Easy there, little one. I know it hurts. I've seen that same look in my old hunting dog's eyes when he'd come back torn up from tangling with something he shouldn't have. Let's see what we can do about that paw." The kitten flinched but didn't retreat. Its sibling watched warily from a few feet away, ready to flee but unwilling to abandon its littermate. Marcus gently cleaned the wound with antiseptic solution, the kitten's muscles tensing but remaining still. He applied antibiotic ointment and wrapped the paw with practiced efficiency, using cohesive bandage that would stay in place but could be chewed off if necessary. "There we go," he murmured, slowly backing away. "That should help. Your mother did a good job raising you two to this size, but she can't help with everything." Over the following 2 weeks, Marcus returned to the same spot each morning. He brought small amounts of food, never enough to create dependency, but sufficient to help the injured kitten maintain strength while healing. He documented everything meticulously: the rapid improvement in the kitten's gait, the gradual filling out of its frame, the complex social dynamics between the siblings. But it was the question of their size that truly captivated him. These kittens, which he estimated to be about 5 months old based on tooth development and behavior patterns, were easily 30% larger than comparable age kittens he'd studied in Florida, Texas, and Arizona. The difference was too significant to be individual variation or simple nutrition differences. Marcus spent his evenings in his temporary field station, a converted cabin on the refuge property, poring over scientific literature and his own accumulated data. The answer, when it came to him, was elegantly simple and profoundly illustrative of evolutionary adaptation. Bergmann's rule. This biological principle, first articulated by German biologist Carl Bergmann in 1847, states that within a broadly distributed taxonomic group, populations and species of larger size are found in colder environments, while smaller-bodied populations and species are found in warmer regions. The mechanism was thermodynamic. Larger bodies have a lower surface area to volume ratio, allowing them to retain heat more efficiently in cold climates. Oregon's bobcats, dealing with much colder winters than their Florida cousins, had evolved to be significantly larger. The thick marine layer that rolled in from the Pacific, the snow that occasionally dusted the Cascade foothills, the long, damp winters of the Willamette Valley, all had shaped these cats over thousands of generations into more substantial animals than their sun-dwelling relatives. Marcus's detailed observations and measurements would eventually contribute to a paper published in the Journal of Mammalogy, adding to the body of evidence supporting Bergmann's rule in North American felids. But the scientific significance paled compared to the personal impact of those morning encounters. By the 3rd week, both kittens would appear shortly after Marcus arrived at what had become their unofficial meeting spot. The injured kitten's limp had all but disappeared, the infection cleared, the wound healing cleanly. He'd removed the bandage after a week, pleased to see healthy tissue forming. The siblings had resumed their normal hunting activities. He'd found evidence of successful kills, small prey animals that indicated their developing skills. On his final morning at the refuge, Marcus sat on the same fallen log where he'd first waited, watching the 2 young bobcats emerge from the forest shadows one last time. They'd grown even in these few weeks, their coats glossier, their movements more confident. The injured kitten, now fully healed, moved with the fluid grace inherent to its species. "You two are going to be magnificent adults," Marcus said softly, knowing they could hear him. "Probably tip the scales at 35, maybe 40 pounds full grown. Your southern cousins would be impressed." The kittens lingered for a moment, those amber eyes regarding him with what he chose to interpret as acknowledgement, before melting back into the forest understory. Marcus knew the chances of seeing them again were slim. Bobcat's home ranges could span dozens of square miles, and these two would soon disperse to establish their own territories. As he packed up his gear for the last time, Marcus reflected on the unexpected gift these encounters had provided. He'd come to Oregon planning to conclude his career with one final routine survey. Instead, he'd been reminded of why he'd chosen this path in the first place: the privilege of witnessing wild lives unfold, the opportunity to make a difference, however small, in the survival of individual animals. The drive back to town took him along Highway 99W, through the small farming communities that dotted the valley. He stopped at a local diner in Monroe, where the waitress, Dorothy, who'd gotten used to seeing him these past months, brought him his usual coffee and blackberry pie. "You look different today, Doc," she observed, refilling his cup. "Like you've seen something special." Marcus smiled, thinking of two oversized bobcat kittens who'd taught him that even after 40 years in the field, nature still held surprises. "I suppose I have, Dorothy. I suppose I have." The paper he would eventually publish, co-authored with colleagues from Oregon State University, would document not only the size variations in Oregon bobcat populations, but also include a detailed case study of successful field intervention in injured juvenile wildlife. The photographs he'd managed to capture, always from a respectful distance, would grace the cover of Wildlife Biology Quarterly. But more importantly to Marcus, the encounter had rekindled something he'd thought was dimming: his wonder at the natural world. He postponed his retirement, accepting a position with the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife to establish a long-term bobcat monitoring program in the Willamette Valley. 5 years later, motion sensor cameras at Finley National Wildlife Refuge would capture images of two adult bobcats, both exceptionally large for their species, successfully raising their own litters in the same meadow where Marcus had first encountered them. One of them bore a faint scar on its left front paw, barely visible but unmistakable to someone who knew where to look. Marcus, reviewing the footage in his office at the Wildlife Department, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The morning mist visible in the background of the images reminded him of that first encounter, when two oversized kittens had challenged his assumptions and renewed his passion for wildlife conservation. "Bergman's rule," he murmured to his colleague, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who was reviewing the footage with him. But also something more. Sometimes the rules of science intersect with moments of grace in ways we don't expect. Sarah, young and eager, fresh from her doctorate at Cornell, looked at him curiously. "Grace, Dr. Thompson?" Marcus pointed to the scarred paw on the screen. "That kitten should have died." Statistics, natural selection, the harsh mathematics of survival. Everything suggested it wouldn't make it. But sometimes, Sarah, we get the privilege of tipping the scales. Not interfering with nature, but being part of it, just for a moment. He pulled up his original field notes from that May morning, the precise measurements and observations that had contributed to their understanding of regional bobcat variations. But between the lines of scientific data, he could still feel the weight of that first gaze, the trust offered by a wounded wild animal, the profound connection that transcended species boundaries. The Finley National Wildlife Refuge continues its role as a sanctuary for diverse wildlife populations. The bobcat population remains robust, with individuals consistently measuring larger than their counterparts in warmer climates, living proof of evolutionary adaptation written in bone and muscle. And somewhere in those 5,325 acres, the descendants of two oversized kittens continue their ancient dance of predator and prey, their very existence a testament to both the harsh realities and unexpected mercies of the wild. Marcus Thompson retired 3 years later at 70, but continued volunteering with wildlife rehabilitation centers throughout Oregon. He never forgot the lesson those kittens taught him, that science and compassion need not be mutually exclusive, that understanding the rules of nature doesn't preclude participating in its occasional moments of grace, and that sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from what we observe, but from how we choose to act on those observations.